My nephew's girlfriend is the most disgusting human being on earth. I can't take it anymore. I have felt the need to share my disgust for quite some time, but have not had an audience with whom I can comfortably express my displeasure at this experience. I am a highish earner, but the rest of my family are a bunch of white trash rednecks. I say that with all the love in the world for white trash rednecks. They are good people, but, let's face it, most of them don't have a lot of financial prowess. My wife and I try to help out our nephews and nieces as they grow up, teaching them the basics of personal finance. We try to provide a launching pad into adulthood so they could move away from their parents. One of said nephews is a burgeoning neckbeard. We tried hard to steer him to a different path and allowed him to move in with us and put him to work. Part of what we initially had to teach him was personal hygiene. It took about a month, but we finally got him showering regularly, grooming himself properly, brushing his teeth and all that good stuff. As soon as he took to personal hygiene, girls started noticing him. He actually is a decent looking lad when he's not covered with grime. But the years of being a literal teenage dirtbag took a toll on his self-esteem and made him very socially awkward. As a 20-year-old, he can only talk about stuff like the esoteric Star Wars canon, Marvel comic books, and D&D. He struck out with some nice girls because of his utter lack of social skills, but on his fourth attempt he struck gold, as he saw it. She was pretty enough. She shared his passion for useless fandom knowledge, and liked to pretend she was a cat. She was also morbidly obese. Nephew is a wiry, skinny kid, so they made quite a pair. She started spending more and more time at my house. Then, I started to notice the smell. I was quite sure it's because she can't properly wash herself, and I had some sympathy for that, but, you can only deal with so much. So after a bit, we had a talk with my nephew about making sure she showered before she came over. It was a little embarrassing, but necessary. It didn't take. Worse, his hygiene started lapsing and he was developing a funk of his own. We had to simply break it down and tell them both that they had to do better with hygiene if they were going to be in our home. That conversation gained some traction, and they both started smelling a little better. She still had the smell when you got within about 5 feet of her, though. It was sincerely appalling. My wife finally explained to me that it was probably feminine hygiene issues that caused her to reek. It was the last thing I wanted to think about, but whatever. I let it be and was okay with her being over. My nephew seemed to adore her. We just left the windows open a lot when she came over. Wife and I decided at one point to take a little vacation. We gave my nephew a list of things to take care of as house sitters while we were gone. We begged him to make sure he took care of himself and cleaned up the place as he made messes. He swore he was on it. We trusted him to take care of our home and animals while we were gone. A week and a half later, we returned. We returned to chaos. The animals had lost weight. Dishes were piled up. Then there was the smell. It was strong. I was pissed off, as was my wife. We called out for nephew, but no answer. I could hear his music playing in his room. I knocked. I knocked again and called out for him. I opened the door. I shouldn't have opened that door. On the other side nephew and fat cat were getting down. He was going to town railing her. She was wearing kitty ears, and her legs were flailing in the air offbeat to Wine Rose Diggy Diggy Hole blaring from his 1980s stereo setup. Her flab was splashing about in waves. I stood in mute shock and horror for what seemed like forever. Then, the smell hit me full in the face. Mixed with my nephew's stench and smells of fornication. I could taste it. It was a cloying blight that consumed my senses. I immediately, reflexively, gagged, and then vomited. I could not help it. I ran from the room vomiting down the hallway, passing my shocked wife. She said, "The smell?" I could only nod while voiding my guts into the toilet. Once I calmed down, I asked her to please ask them to leave. Before that time, I could not fathom that somebody could smell so bad as to make another human instantly vomit. I would not have believed it possible. I was so naive, and so wrong. The whole thing had me incensed. I was exacerbated by my slight feeling of shame for vomiting at her smell. There was also anger that I was feeling ashamed. The upbraiding of our nephew for the condition of the house spilled into a conversation that nobody should allow their hygiene to deteriorate to the point that it causes other people to gag. He took it much better than I expected, and said he would move in with her. In the aftermath, we had to have his room, our game room, and the living room professionally cleaned. We couldn't air it out enough to get rid of the stench. Since then, my wife and I use it as the pinnacle of disgusting. Stuff may be foul, but it cannot measure up to the stinky kitty incident.